Welcome to the Solo Coder Podcast, where we talk shop with coders on how to start, change, and improve your coding career. Here is your host, Aderson Oliveira.
I spoke with Preetam and Sankalp Jonah. They are the founders of Delight Chat, a platform helping Shopify businesses with their customer service needs. This was the first time in the podcast that I had two guests at once, so I was really looking forward to it. I came across Preetam after reading his blog post about Micro-SaaS. The concept grabbed my attention. Preetam wrote so eloquently that I said I had to talk to him. Naturally, with co-founders, Preetam is more in the business side and Sankalp in the technology. We spoke about what is the first thing someone should look at before jumping to building their own SaaS product. SaaS means software as a service, and we have building their own SaaS product. SaaS means software as a service, and we have discussed about it during the chat. Preetam and Sankalp are not new to doing business together. Their first product was so successful that their competitors tried to bring their site down by launching a distributed denial of service attack, also called DDoS. I found these guys to be very smart but also very humble. There's so much they can teach us, and if you stick around, you will also come to the same realization. Enjoy the chat. And if you like the podcast and want to help, leave a comment, leave a review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast player. It will make a huge difference. Hello, Aderson Oliveira here. This is a Solo Coder Podcast, where I have interesting conversations with coders, developers, programmers. Today is no different. Today we have a different setup though. We are three. I'm talking to two guests at the same time because I thought that their stories are very in line with each other, and I thought about talking to both of them at the same time. And who are they? We have Preetam Nath and Sankalp Jonah. Guys, can you please introduce yourself? And I'm going to start with Preetam. Preetam, welcome. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks so much for having me here. My name is Preetam. I have been working with startups since the last 5 years, mostly as a product manager, and then branched out to build my own business with Sankalp. And it's been 2 years since we started that journey. We built a Shopify app that grew to 29K in MRR bootstrap. And now we are building a new business called Delight Chat together again.
Sankalp, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Addison. My name is Sankalp, straight away as the first employee. It was just two co-founders at the time when I joined. So I built, and I was already used to working in a lean team where one person is supposed to wear many hats, as opposed to my peers at the time who joined big corporations and they had a structure and processes to follow, whereas I didn't. And that sort of was my mindset since then. I kept moving from one startup to another in the past 5 years, trying to find what I was looking for, what made me happy. But I realized that I was never going to be happy unless I started my own thing, which is when Preetam and I got together and started our first product together, which didn't really work out, but it taught us a lot along the way. And then we started another venture together, which we managed to grow to 25K in MRR. And that brought us to where we are here today, running Delight Chat.
Let's step back a little bit. And I want to start our story here by the time that you both of you came together with the first initiative, with the first idea. So I'm going to go with Preetam. Preetam, tell me how you both came together for the first time to try the first idea.
So the first time we worked together on an idea was before all of this, before the Shopify app, before Delight Chat. It was way back in 2016, right after Sankalp and I had met at this company we both worked at, and I had quit to start something of my own, try something for the first time. At that time, Sankalp wasn't looking to quit and start something. He still wanted to continue at a job. And he did agree to help me out with the MVP for the product. So Sankalp built the backend and helped me out there. And I found someone else who could build the front end, who Sankalp helped. And that was the first time we worked.
What is an MVP?
An MVP is a minimal viable product, a product which has all the functionality that solves a particular problem. While it may not look very good, it may not be very jazzy, but it solves the problem, and it's enough for somebody to actually be willing to pay for.
So, how was the first experience working closely with Preetam?
It was great because Preetam has this a very high energy personality. He tends to bring that into the people that he works with as well. So even if I was not confident about quitting and jumping into running a business, it was very seamless for him to convince me to do so. He was pretty good at selling a dream, and that's why we are here today, running this business together.
Preetam, how did you
I showed him the bigger picture. I said, life's more than just a career path or just making some money, yada yada, stuff like that. We have to aspire for more, and the only path to that is the path we forge ourselves. And business was a path to that. Also, it was just too tempting to try and build our own things in a world where so many people were doing it, and we had all the tools, necessary skills, and anything else that was needed for us to do it. So it was like, why not? No, the question was never why.
how well the first idea worked, Sankalp?
The first idea made us realize that just because we like building something, it doesn't mean that somebody would be willing to pay for it. We enjoyed the process of building this product and trying to get customers for it. But we realized that we went about it the other way around. What we had to do first was to get the customers and to identify the market, to figure out if we build this product, is anybody actually going to pay for it? And building the product is actually the easy part, which should be the last thing that you do. This is something which we realized when we built the first product, where I just contributed a little bit. Preetam did most of the work, but the conclusion was that Preetam told me, you can't sell software to an industry that doesn't like to pay for software. It's as simple as that.
Preetam, you realized that after how long you were into the journey of the first product?
Oh, I spent way too much time on the first product, way more than I should have. So by the time the business was getting wrapped up and we realized that this is not going to work, oh, I spent way too much time on the first product, way more than I should have. So by the time the business was getting wrapped up and we realized that this is not going to work, it was a year had passed. And while there were many signs of people using it, like the software we built was for restaurants, and a few restaurants were actually using it. But when it came to them paying us for it, despite seeing value, we realized that this industry, restaurants, didn't care about the software we built, and they saw it as a good to have, and they were negotiating on prices that were anyway not going to be sustainable, which just meant that they didn't want it. So we waited for too long to command that price and put our foot down, saying, hey, either this is going to be something you use and pay for, or it's not. And the answer sadly was that it's not. And that's when we had to rethink deeply on what went wrong. And our conclusion was, and these co-founders were working on this full time, just like me. And our conclusion was that if it is so hard to sell something to someone, and even after we try our best, they're not willing to buy it, then there's no point in trying to push against a market. Instead, you want to solve problems where the market pulls you. What that means is you're building something and people are like, hey, when is it ready? I need this. I needed this yesterday. I'm ready to pay for it right now, so you can give me early access. That's when you know that you're building something people really want versus something that they say they want.
You don't want to be in a position to try to convince people to use your product. I mean, your product should be so, I guess, clear and enticing that people are lining up to use it.
Absolutely. It's all boiling down to the problem statement that you solve and how important it is for your end customer, for that problem to be solved. For that problem to be solved. If they can live without that problem being solved, then you are not really required. You're a good to have.
After trying the first product, didn't work as well as you guys had thought of, that worked as a foundation for you to chase the next opportunity. So how did the next opportunity come up to both of you?
So I think the next opportunity came up when both of us got bored of our jobs once again, like we usually do. And we got together, we tried researching a few things. And we looked at this product called Hotjar, which is a screen recording tool for the browser. And we thought, why not do the same thing, but for a mobile app instead? The idea seemed very enticing. And we thought that product managers would jump on this because they will get to see what their use screen recording. And just based on the idea, we sort of jumped into it.
Preetam, how well did that one worked?
We shut that down in 4 months, or 4 or 5 months, and I'm just glad that we shut it down way sooner than a year. I'm still mad that we took 4 or 5 months to shut it down. So here's what happened. uh, we we tried to be extra careful this time, burnt from the last time of building something that people didn't truly want. So we did a lot of user interviews. I remember sharing recordings of user interviews with Sankalp every time one gets done. And I would talk to product managers and people in different startups, and I would ask them, do you need this? How do you use it? What problem does it solve? And everything was positive. Everybody wanted to integrate the SDK for the mobile app, screen recorder tool. And we were happily building it away, thinking, we are onto something. We are onto something. It took about 3 months for MVP because it was a complex piece of software to get it right. And once we had the MVP, we went back to all these 30 odd people who we had done interviews with. And turns out nobody integrated the SDK. One of them integrated it in a month later and then reached out to us again 2, 3 months later when they were ready to use it. But none of the others even bothered to integrate. And I was kind of baffled. I was like, we talked to them. They said they want this. They told us on our faces. I've done one-on-one sales also. So what went wrong? And around that time, an entrepreneur, a friend of mine from a group, I don't recall who it was exactly, but whoever it was came at the right time and said, read this book called The Mom Test. And Mom Test was this book by Rob Fitzcarrick. I might have not pronounced his name correctly, but it's a short book. And all it does is tells you how to ask the right questions and who to ask those questions while you are validating a business idea. And so after reading that book, which took me 4 hours, and I just spent an entire evening just reading it, thinking I need to get to the second round of interviews with the same users again. And I went back to those users, and this time I asked more charged questions that were difficult to answer, questions that were not leading. Like, would you use this tool is a very leading question. What you instead want to find out is this problem real for you? And if it is real, if you're saying that it's such a difficult problem, then name a few alternatives that are available today and tell them, why aren't you using them? If this problem is as important as you say it is, why aren't you solving it? And that's when it came out that while the problem seems important to them, they are perfectly fine without solving it. It was not a real need. It was not a painkiller. It was a vitamin. And the moment I realized that, I talked to Sankalp and we met, and I told him this has the same vibes as the previous startup that I attempted that failed. And while I don't want to throw away last few months' work right now, I think we should do it and start afresh instead of trying to salvage something that's headed in the wrong direction.
That's a very, very interesting point. Let me just recap that to see if I got the essence of that. So what you're saying is that by asking the right questions, and the question was really, how else are you solving this problem now? If they were not solving the problem currently, you were building something that they were not even caring about that much to solve it, isn't it?
Yep.
So now you are in your second product. you are, in a way, in your second experiment.
I realized a few things. Firstly, I was already consulting at another company and doing this as a side thing. And I realized that as a result of that, I could do neither of them correctly. I wasn't doing well at my work, and I couldn't contribute much to the product either. And the only reason for that was I had one foot in a safe zone and one foot in a risky zone. And I realized that that's not going to work out. Either I have to go all out and take a risk completely, or forget about this and go back to doing a job. That was the first thing I realized. The second thing was we ended up making the same obvious mistake again for the second time when we already realized for the first time that it's important to validate the realness of the problem before actually building the solution. We still didn't do that. Important to validate the realness of the problem before actually building the solution. We still didn't do that, or rather, we didn't do it correctly. So this time, I was very clear that we will not write a single line of code until we know that we will at least get 10 users for the product that we build. So with that thought process, we started looking for ways to figure out if people will use the product that we build. And we realized that the easiest way to do that is to go to marketplaces. Like the Slack App Store, for instance, the Salesforce App Exchange, or the Shopify App Store. The advantage of this is already a very big ecosystem. There's a lot of problems to be solved. There are people solving these problems. There's people looking for solutions. So you don't have to put in any place and identify a problem that's large enough that there's a lot of solutions. When you search for that problem, a lot of solutions should come up. But at the same time, there has to be some window for you to enter in. And that's where the Shopify App Store came in. We met this friend of ours who was making, at that time, he was making 20K MRR with just one Shopify app, and he was just one person. And that blew our minds. That really showed us that if you target the right, it showed us that our approach was wrong this whole time. And we first had to find out a place where we can get users. So we started researching the Shopify App Store. We started looking for keywords that people are searching for on the App Store. We searched for each of those keywords, and we try to identify looking for keywords that people are searching for on the App Store. We search for each of those keywords, and we try to identify how many apps are already in place, how many of them have a large number of reviews, how many of them have a large velocity of reviews. Because let's say a particular app got 100 reviews, but in the last 1 year, the number of reviews it received was 0. That means that particular problem was important a while back, but it's no longer the case. So we had to look for keywords where there are apps that are getting a continuous stream of reviews, but the top rated app is still not so highly rated that a new player cannot come in and take some of the market. So with that, we shortlisted a few more keywords. And from that shortlist, we just ran. And then we decided to build a product, which was around WhatsApp that helped Shopify merchants communicate with their customers over WhatsApp. Now, after doing all this, we were fairly confident that the moment this app goes live, we will at least get 10 users. We can use those users to get feedback and build on top of this. Once we reached this conclusion, that is when I sat and started writing the code.
Let me step back a little bit there because I'm curious about one thing. I think it was a very interesting insight when you mentioned there that you find out a good place to start is by finding marketplaces. How did you come up to that conclusion? Where that information came up to you? And I'm going to go with Preetam to answer that.
All right. So after 2 attempts failed, our thought was, and Sankalp was discussing in between was, we were wondering what we were doing wrong in terms of why are we trying out ideas, and I had also tried out even before this, and why was it failing every time? And the main conclusion was that we are not solving problems that people actually care about, just like how we concluded with the session recording idea. And while we can go and interview them and try to validate that is this really a problem, we found another way to have a sure shot validation that this problem is indeed real. And this was inspired by looking at small businesses, mom and pop stores, and physical retail stores all around us whenever we would walk the streets of Bangalore. That all of these businesses are succeeding, and most of them are surviving year on year. What are they doing differently that we don't seem to be getting? And it turned out they were solving existing demand. So the existing demand part basically says that if you're solving year on year, what are they doing differently that we don't seem to be getting? And it turned out they were solving existing demand. So the existing demand part basically says that if you're solving a problem, there's already people solving that problem through alternate solutions. For example, when we started Delight Chat, we already knew that people would use our solution because people are already buying and paying for customer support software since a few years, and even more so amongst e-commerce stores nowadays. So it was kind of given that this problem is real. The question was whether we'd be able to find those customers. So how we changed our approach is we looked for a place where demand existed and validation for that demand existed for and a marketplace was a really a good starting point because there are already existing apps which are catering to existing demand, which means that problem is real and people are will install my app just because I exist is low. But like Sankalp said, now if we go to a marketplace where demand already exists and a problem is already validated, we need to find out a reason why people will prefer our solution over the competitors. And it's often by addressing the problems that the competing apps have. For example, some of the apps were too expensive, some of the apps were too confusing, some of the apps lacked had a lot of missing features that we could build in, and therefore appeal to those users who were not satisfied with it. And that's exactly what we did when we ended up building a Shopify app. And as for why specifically Shopify, like Sankalp said, we already had a friend who proved to us that the Shopify App Store succeeds, whereas we hadn't heard from anyone yet, apart from one or two case studies on the internet, which everybody had read, that Slack App Store was a huge success for small developers, much like ourselves. And so, since we knew someone who was closer to some kind of an insider knowledge, but it could have easily gone wrong. That was a very bold bet that we placed, and thankfully it worked out for us.
Let's jump to Super Lemon. It seems to have been the first, I would say, hit that you guys had. Tell me how long it took for you to realize, okay, we have something here, and then what is the story after that?
Honestly, it took less than a week for us to realize that we had something here. The moment the app went live, we started getting installs. It started with 10 installs a day, 20 installs a day, 30 installs a day. We started talking to some of the customers who started writing good reviews that made the app go up in ranking. Competitors started sending us an email saying, how can you make your app free? Our livelihood is getting affected. And one of the competitors tried to run a DDoS attack, an email saying, how can you make your app free? Our livelihood is getting affected. And one of the competitors tried to run a DDoS attack on us. All of this happened in a span of 1 month since we launched. So it was very obvious that we had something here. We just needed to figure out how to monetize it properly.
Now you had something in your hands that you knew there was an audience. How did you come up with the right strategy or the first strategy to monetize?
This was interesting for us because the other apps already had monetized, and they had a very defined way to monetize their apps, which is, the app we built specifically had WhatsApp chat and share buttons, and they monetized by hiding some of the features or templates for the buttons behind a paid plan, a monthly paid plan. And in our minds, we were trying to brainstorm whether we should do the same or whether we can do something that flips the table. And we decided to go the flip the table route. The thought process here was if we try to make money exactly the way they are, then they can just lower their prices. We have to make money in a way that forces them to run after us and gives us the leadership position. And so what we did was we took all their paid features and made it free. And then we kept talking to users, like hundreds of them in a month and in a span of 2, 3 months. And we found out exactly what they are looking for and what value can we give to them that they're not able to receive today from anyone else. And that's where we came up with the idea of uh, giving users the ability to send messages, because they were able to receive messages using a WhatsApp button, but none of the apps were letting them send messages to their customers. And when they send messages to their customers, they're able to generate money out of it. Some of the customers end up converting. Once we realized that fact, we started building features that let them send messages. And the moment we did that, we also uh, made our previous plans free, the uh, plans around the buttons, the share and chat buttons, and we started monetizing on the send features. And it was pretty obvious to us that it worked. Later on, everybody else copied the same thing, but by approaching monetization this way, we had a head start. Not only was our base product, which was almost as good or better than everyone else, free while everyone else was charging, we had come up with features that nobody else was doing because nobody was talking to users, and therefore we could confidently charge for it because we knew that it provided value to users.
Let's talk about MRR for Superlemon. By the way, just to clarify, MRR means monthly recurring revenue. So, in the highest of Superlemon, how far did you get the MRR for Superlemon?
So Superlemon was at 29K MRR, and since then we haven't publicly shared more MRR growth details. For some reasons we can't disclose yet.
In a way, it seems to me that you are done with Superlemon. And then let's bridge that now to Delight Chats. Now you have this new venture going on. So you have Delight Chat. So tell me about how the idea behind Delight Chats came about.
So the idea for Delight Chat, when we were running Superlemon back in the day, we realized how important customer support was, because our tool was primarily providing customer support for merchants to communicate with their customers over WhatsApp. And that's when we realized that typically e-commerce merchants get a bunch of queries from a lot of different channels because their customers are scattered across a lot of different channels. Like they run ads on Facebook or Instagram, and then a few customers reply to those ads. In addition to that, they have people emailing them, sending them messages over WhatsApp, and they would have to take care of each of these queries separately, right, with their own interface. So we thought, why not have a single interface with all the channels in one place, where a customer can, whenever a customer raises a query on any of these channels, it all comes into one unified inbox, and the support agent can easily reply to them. They could even tag their team members and do their internal communication as well in the same tool. And we thought that would save them a lot of time and grief.
Chats, it seems like a problem that so many other companies and there are so many other solutions out there. So, why did you guys think that you could come up with a unique angle to a space that apparently seems to be that you could come up with a unique angle to a space that apparently seems to be so crowded?
So it's really interesting because we had to answer this question for ourselves before we could, actually work on this idea. Because our first thing was, okay, we're very sure that we will get some users, and I'll get to that in a bit. But we were not sure whether we can build a large company around this, something that aligned with our long-term vision. We want to build something for the next 5 years and build something for longer if possible. Because the longer we do something, the greater the outcome and impact that we can create. So we were mostly wondering, does this problem need solving by another player? And we started talking to merchants from that angle, trying to understand why aren't they using existing solutions in the market. like we're just blanket name the solutions and say, why aren't you using X or why aren't you using Y? You're saying you face this problem, but you're not using X right now. Why not? Is to do the work manually in the time being, or even settle for another solution which has the feature set they require or at a price point that they can afford. So we started forming a hypothesis on why are people looking at alternatives or new solutions even though the market has so many. So a few things that came up to us. One, it turns out that e-commerce merchants increasingly wanted support tools that were tailored for e-commerce itself, which means a very simple example of that would be every support tool has canned responses. Canned responses simply means you save a response and you can invoke it quickly and then send a reply without typing the whole reply every time. But e-commerce merchants need to perform a lot of actions after a canned response, which is okay, I need to refund the order now for this customer. I need to go back to my Shopify or whichever e-commerce the platform I use, go and find that customer, actually make the refund, confirm from another piece of software that the refund has actually been processed, go back to the customer with a screenshot and then share it with them. So this whole process, there's nobody who's trying to just, this is just one, I just randomly picked a drop out of their entire life cycle, like all the problems that a merchant faces. Nobody's trying to specifically make this kind of problem and all the related problems easier. All the support tools are generic and they are built for everyone, which means they are not built for anyone in particular. And we found that a few solutions in the market, very few, like handful, have started tailoring their solutions for e-commerce. So they are integrating with platforms. They are taking care of this process where after you tell the customer, don't worry, I'll take care of your problem, the solution, the tool itself is now helping you actually take care of the problem or process that refund or create that new order or exchange. And even the part that happens before this, which is they're saying, yeah, I'm facing all these problems. How do I find out whether they are actually facing these problems? Who is this customer? When did they place the order? Which are the products that they placed orders with? And the thing is, all of this is happening dozens, if not 100 times a day, depending on the scale of your store, which means what turns out to be a 5 minute or 10-minute excursion to handle one customer ticket can become, if you are an average agent handling 20 to 30 tickets a day, you have essentially spent around 200 to 300 minutes, so up around 5 hours doing things other than just replying to the messages, just handling the logistics around messages. So we discovered that e-commerce merchants want solutions tailored to them. The second thing we discovered was that all the existing solutions that are already in the market, and the one or two of them who are tailoring themselves to e-commerce, are very expensive. And while expensive is not a problem, we went to these merchants and said, again, are very expensive. And while expensive is not a problem, we went to these merchants and said, again, why aren't you using the solution? This one actually has that integration that you need. And they were like, given my scale and the kind of business I run, my budget for this solution is $60 a month or maybe $100 a month. But if I use that solution, I have to pay $300 a month or $750 a month. And they were like, that's just simply outside our budget. So we want to use that solution, but we can't afford it. And then when we started speaking to more merchants, this similar story played out. Give us tools built for e-commerce, and while there are existing tools, all of them are extremely expensive. We are not the enterprise customers. We want to pay something between $50 to $250 a month. And we figured out that there's a market segment for this problem who are not being served. And by serving them, by building something exclusively for them, we believe we can build.
Really found a place there. Instead of going head to head with those big corporations, you went, okay, so what is my angle here? So serving well a very specific audience with very specific features for them at a price point that they can pay. So how are you doing in terms of monthly recurring revenue for Delight Chat right now?
We haven't started charging for the app yet. We are still in beta, and actually, we are going to launch the beta version of the product by the end of this month. And the idea is to let merchants use the app a little bit, iron out all the issues and the bugs, and polish it enough where we are comfortable charging people money. And apart from that, we are yet to figure out the right strategy for pricing. There are multiple ways to do it. We could charge based on the number of support agents using the tool. We could also charge based on number of tickets being resolved. Multiple ways to do it. We could charge based on the number of support agents using the tool. We could also charge based on number of tickets being resolved in a month. And both of them have their own pros and cons, and we are yet to figure out a balance between the two, because when a business grows, the number of support tickets would also increase. So if we charge based on that, then their cost increases as their business grows, which seems fair, but uh, some merchants are hesitant to pay that way. On the other hand, if we charge based on the number of support agents using the tool, they will then try to optimize it in a way that least number of people are using the tool, which is again something that we don't want. So we've not entirely zero in on that aspect yet. And yeah, so coming to your earlier point, we don't have an MRR as of now.
I've heard
Opportunities to celebrate everything that has happened in the last 12 months or actually even just 6 months of our life. And so what we do is whenever we meet, we recollect some of the ones that happened recently and just celebrate those, because they've already happened in the past, but we haven't, cheered on them. So for instance, Delight Chat is now nearly a 10-member team, and we have hired a good set of people who are trustworthy, reliable, and all they're all driven, and I believe we can all help each other get to where we want to go. And this was something unfathomable to us just 4 months ago, like hiring a few people. We started with, let's figure out if we can hire one, then let's figure out if we can hire two, and now we have a whole team, a complete team. So that felt like a huge moment, a huge milestone for us in our journey ahead in the future. And another one was that this new product that we started, something way milestone for us in our journey ahead in the future. And another one was that this new product that we started, something way more complex from the ground up, like unlike Super Lemon, which was just, it took us 2 weeks to build the first version. In Delight Chat's case, by the time the beta launches the end of January, we will have spent around 4 months in development, which is a long period of time compared to where we came from. So we can see the product taking shape. We are able to use it internally. It's starting to look good. Bugs have gotten ironed out to a point where nothing is breaking your core user experience. And it felt like a key milestone in our journey, because now when customers start getting into the mix, things are going to get crazy, and we're going to see again rapid movement. Again, some new milestones will be hit, but we decided these were good enough to celebrate last weekend.
that's awesome. It's also always worth celebrating small wins, big products, big wins.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's no point in waiting for that moment of that large win to celebrate. We just have to celebrate along the way.
I'm just curious. I don't want to focus on technology here, but I'm just curious about the code stack. What is the environment? What is the coding environment of Delight Chat?
So the Delight Chat stack, the front-end code base is built using React.js, and we use this third-party library called Ant Design. It has a very comprehensive set of components for solving various types of use cases, and it's completely open source and free. So we pick those components up, modify them to our requirement, put our own sort of touch to it and our own branding, and use it that way. Our backend, the primary backend is built on Python with the Django framework. And we have a queuing service for which we use Python RQ. And there's a Redis. Primary backend is built on Python with the Django framework. And we have a queuing service for which we use Python RQ. And there's a Redis cache that we use for various things. And the entire thing is deployed on AWS.
So I would love to add something there. So we were very careful with the way we chose our tech stack. So everything is optimized for speed, in the sense that we still need to get our like our foundation right, but we also know that there is a minimum set of features at which point our product will reach parity with what the market already offers, and even maybe it gets slightly better in certain aspects which could end up being a differentiator for us, a reason why people consider us over others. And we anticipated that if we were to build all of that out and the underlying infrastructure to support all of that, we would end up spending the halfway through that year, and by the end of the year we should be profitable, or slightly even better than that if possible. So we decided to pick and choose everything for speed. So Ant design, for instance, is for speed of UI development. Like writing a React component, a new component, is obviously easy. Handling every single edge case for that component, like when you hover, when you click, if there's an error, if it's disabled, all of these cases will need to be built into a new component. Whereas an Ant component, and this is an extremely simple example, the Ant component has all of these states built in. So why should we build it from scratch when we can save months of front-end development using existing components? A similar kind of thing happens in our backend, where we are using a service. Just one of the examples is using the service called Pusher, which we found many other large companies, which I'll not name here, are also using. So it told us that if a 100 million revenue company can use this as their backend infrastructure, so can we. And by using Pusher, we save. So it told us that if a 100 million revenue company can use this as their backend infrastructure, so can we. And by using Pusher, we saved, I bet in the front side we saved, like on the right off the bat, we must have saved 2-3 months of development, but we are probably going to save countless hours of maintenance of that real-time messaging service that we would have otherwise had to build. So we're trying to make very careful choices so that we can move fast while not compromising on the code base, so that 1 year later we don't have to rewrite everything. And I believe that's an important point, because we're going to hit in 6 months, we're going to end up building something that I know many teams end up taking a year or more building it. So I feel like that's the real magic of our new tech stack.
Let me just confirm that, Preetam. Is that Pusher that you talk? Is that the name of the technology? Is that Pusher?
Yeah, Pusher is just one of the many technologies that we use, and we found them to be really good in what they do, which is really.
And it's so simple to use as well. It's essentially sockets as a service. So if you have to do real-time updates, you have to build your own web sockets and stuff. And Pusher just abstracts all of that and just gives you an SDK that you can just quickly integrate. And all you have to do is to pay for the tool, which is the ROI is not even, we can't even calculate the amount of hours that we saved. Yeah, it's infinite right now.
I'd like to help the audience understand what is SaaS, and more specifically, what is a micro-SaaS?
SaaS is not a new term. So SaaS is software as a service, and it's often also discussed in parallel with words like subscription. So what happened is people used to pay for software upfront, one-time purchases or licenses, and then somebody, or rather, the advent of cloud and internet being the business model or the delivery model of value changed from one-time purchases that came in a CD to here's a website, and the app that you used to purchase from us one time now exists here, and instead of a one-time fee, you can just pay us on a mostly it's a monthly or a yearly schedule, monthly being the most common. And guess what? We'll keep updating the software and it'll keep getting better, and you just keep paying the same monthly fee, and you keep getting the new benefits. So SaaS is basically that, software as a service available via the cloud in a subscription format, typically monthly or yearly. And SaaS has taken over everything. Like when was the last time somebody purchased a CD or a license or one-time purchase of a software, or even if it happens, it's not common anymore, versus we just put our credit cards and pay a monthly fee. And micro-SaaS is just an anchor term. So micro-SaaS is essentially an anchor word. It could have been something else. It could have been mini SaaS for all we know. But micro-SaaS is essentially saying that SaaS originally started being built by large teams, which could afford cloud infrastructure. Then AWS came, so more people could afford to deliver software through the cloud because you didn't have to set up physical servers. And what micro-SaaS is saying is we are at a point we're making history right now. We're at this point in terms of technological development where one person, or maybe a group of 1 or 2 or 3 people, are sufficient to build a high quality and complex software product and deliver it to customers across the world through the power of the internet and all the infrastructure that companies like AWS and others have built. And what Micro-SaaS does is it says that you don't need to have a team of 100 people. You don't need to make $100 million a year in revenue. You don't need to have servers. In fact, you don't even need to have an office. You could be actually sitting on a beach. You will have year in revenue. You don't need to have servers. In fact, you don't even need to have an office. You could be actually sitting on a beach. You will have to still work though, otherwise it won't work out for you. But as a 1 or 2% team, you can build a business, a software business that works while you are not working. So you might be sleeping and it's still working, being used by users, and you can earn your livelihood, or you might actually be able to earn more than what your livelihood was paying you. So that's what Micro-SaaS really embodies, is that individuals can now build fully fledged software products using modern technology and build a lifestyle and livelihood around it.
What would you say to someone that wanted to create their own Micro-SaaS?
Yeah, so I think like for with any other business, I think it starts with identifying demand. And with micro-SaaS, it's slightly easier to identify demand because you could just go to a community or a marketplace where a lot of business already happens. Anchor yourself to one particular aspect of that business. For instance, the Slack App Store is one example. There are a bunch of use cases there. You could solve a very specific problem and try to see if you can make a business out of it. The Shopify App Store is again a very good example, and a Shopify App Store is slightly better because there are folks there whose livelihood runs because of what Shopify provides them. So to think that they might pay a little more money for a small service that enriches their experience a little further is like not unfathomable at all. So once you've identified a community, the next thing to do is to narrow down your focus on what you want to focus on. So that can be done by looking at what people are searching for in that particular community. For instance, on the Shopify App Store, you could go type out a few letters in the search bar and see what it auto completes to. If it auto completes, that means it's a keyword, which means enough people are searching for it, and that way you can identify the pain points of the merchants and then further narrow down your focus on something maybe you're interested in, coupled with a keyword that is easier to target. Easier to target in the sense there's not too much competition. Maybe the top apps that show up for that keyword don't have very good reviews. That's how you could identify a particular niche where there's enough demand, there's not enough competition, and if you do a really good job, then you can kill it.
I think Sankalp gave a very deep answer about if you were to drill down this. But if I were to summarize, basically, more people need to do market validation to find out whether their idea is actually needed, like the problem is real. And if their problem is real, then how will they find those customers?
You guys are very smart. I truly mean that. And I'm quite sure that on your walks and researches and while you're trying to validate ideas, you may have come across other ideas. So I would like to try to tap a little bit into that. So any other SaaS or micro SaaS opportunities that you found, but for one reason or another you decide to move forward with the light chats? Because again, we have to choose and pick and choose our battles, so you cannot handle everything. So anything out there that you could say, if I was not doing the light chats, I could be doing that.
Honestly, the answer is really difficult because I think through this journey, Sankalp and I have acquired this lens of looking at problems that are faced by people or businesses, and as a result, we feel like, I mean, we could pick up any idea and we could figure out how to make it into a business as of today. The question becomes, do you want to make that business versus, you're, like you said, you have to pick the battles that you actually want to fight. So I would say the world is literally full of infinite opportunity right now. And all somebody needs to do is decide that they want to find a problem, and then I would say there's two distinct ways to identify problems. One is go deep in a category, or two is go deep in a market. By category, I mean, suppose someone says, I'm going to build productivity tools. That's a category of problems that are faced by people across every industry. Whether you are whether you're an e-commerce store or a software development agency or a software product business like ours, or you can take any other example. Everybody needs a productivity tool. So productivity is a category, and you can go really deep by picking a category and then trying to find a niche within it or a specific problem set within it that is not solved really well for a set of customers. Or on the other hand, the path at least we have chosen so far is go deep into an industry and try to understand everything that this industry faces, all the problems that they have. Where do they need help with? What are the tools that they're already using for it? And where are people seeking new tools? And so you bet on the industry, that the industry is going to grow. For instance, we have bet that the e-commerce industry is going to grow. For us, everything inside the e-commerce industry seems like an opportunity, because the industry itself is going to be 10 times larger in the next 10 years than what it is today, which means anything we start today will benefit from a 10 times larger audience in the next 10 years. It's all familiar with. What are some problems we are good at solving, or we have an advantage at solving, and then we try to solve that. And Delight Chat is a culmination of these thoughts.
How do you guys handle conflicts and disagreements?
So whenever we have a conflict, we sort of try to break down the problem and understand why, like, is it a conflict because our individual opinions, feelings, and ego is taking over, or is it a conflict for some other reason? If it's because of our individual feelings, then that goes right out the window right away, because we've made a pact with each other. Like when we started this, that our individual opinions and feelings don't matter. It's that whatever is good for the business is good for us. So if the conflict was caused by that, it's resolved quite easily. But if it's a deeper problem, as in we both have different opinions on how to solve a particular problem, then we try and do it based on the data that is as well, a few experts that we know, a few friends, and then we try and we group together and like take the feedback that everyone's given and sort of sort through it and figure out what's the best way forward.
Like Sankalp said, we know why we are here, which is uh, we are here to solve problems, and ultimately, what is the best part to solving the problem is the answer that should win. So we use data, we use intuition. We also assume that we don't know everything, and therefore, wherever we don't know everything, we go online or we ask people who have worked in similar problems that, hey, how did you do this? What was your rationale or decision making? And we try to ask people who have opposite spectrums of opinions on the same matter, because that lets us think about, okay, how do we evaluate holistically instead of just leaning on one kind of thinking. And then we try to use all of that information, and the more important a decision with like more long term consequences, the more time we spend. Otherwise, we try to move fast, because most decisions are reversible. And so we take all this information in, and we come to a decision. We explain. We sometimes, if I think there's been very few instances where we had to do this, where we would write down somewhere the pros and cons of this decision, the pros and cons of decision number two, and then out of that try to figure out which one is overall the best decision for us or for the company or for the product we are building. So we just try to be objective, because we know why we are here, which is to build a great business.
Delight people.
Yes, and ourselves in the process.
Okay. Guys, thanks so much for doing this, for taking the time. Is there anything else that you mentioned that you want to say before we say our goodbyes?
I think there needs to be more people building businesses, businesses like ours, which is like probably going to be a slightly larger size team, or businesses that are one or two people or even five people for that matter, because the world should not be run by billion-dollar companies. The problems and the wealth needs to be shared by 1,000 millionaires instead. So we need more people in the world building businesses.
Preetam, Sankalp, you guys are smart. You guys are very unassuming. But again, I'm so happy that I had the opportunity to have this conversation with you before you become a big company and you don't want to talk anymore to a small podcast again. So I'm so happy that I caught you guys in the beginning of your major journey, because again, you won't want to talk to me later, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to bug you. Maybe I'm gonna try to bug you maybe in a year, in a little bit over that, so I can check where the light chat is, where you both are, because I see a bright future for not only the light chats, but you both. If it's not the light chat, it'll be the next one or the next one. You will always have something in mind to work around. But again, focus on the light chat. I wish you all the best, all the luck with that. And again, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Solo Coder Podcast. For more information, show notes, and links mentioned in this episode,